Why are we seeing more occurrences of financial fraud and higher scrutiny on part of regulators into corruption?
In terms of financial fraud, there's two typical things we see in an economic environment that is perhaps not as buoyant as it has been in the past. Firstly, we'll see more frauds being perpetrated, and secondly, we'll see more frauds being uncovered. In terms of the reasons why more frauds will be perpetrated, typically you've got financial problems of individuals that are working in entities, so they may be facing periods where their bonuses are not as good, then they may be not getting the promotions that they're used to having, so therefore they look to boost their salary by committing some financial fraud on the entity that they're working for. They may be just trying to maintain their current lifestyle, so they're used to a level of bonuses and pay and they're trying to keep that. Or they may just be dissatisfied with company and management for not promoting them, something like that. In terms of then why more are uncovered, well, companies will typically, if they've been perpetrating a fraud, they'll try to conceal it. So they will try and manipulate the financial statements to conceal this from, be it a foreign investor or another shareholder, or from external stakeholders. And that becomes more difficult in times that are not as buoyant as previously. When times are good, profits are large, even if you're skimming some off to management, the company's results can still look good, and foreign investors, for example, won't pay as much scrutiny as they might do in times where the profits are much lower. In relation to corruption, again, in economic downturns or times when times aren't as buoyant, there's obviously more pressure to win business on corporations and its employees. So it's a highly competitive environment. If your competitors are paying bribes, or even if they're not, the way for you to win business may be to pay a high bribe or to pay bribes where competitors aren't.
What are the major regulations that companies need to be familiar with in terms of corruption and bribery?
Yeah, I mean, clearly companies need to be aware of their local laws and regulations first and foremost, because the local authorities are always going to pay scrutiny to any breaches of those regulations or laws. But there are two large global pieces of legislation that companies should be particularly wary of. Firstly, the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and secondly, the UK Bribery Act. Now, both acts are similar in they've got very strong extraterritorial jurisdiction. And by that I mean, for example, under the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, if you're a foreign company but you have a US subsidiary, or you have a US parent, or you trade shares in your company on a US market, you'll be captured under the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act if your businesses have fallen foul of that legislation in any way, so by paying bribes to a foreign government official to win or retain business, for example. So it's equally the same under the UK Bribery Act, and perhaps even broader. Again, if the company has got any sort of involvement and does any sort of business in the UK, even if the bribes have been paid overseas by a foreign entity to another foreign individual or entity, that behaviour will be captured under the UK Bribery Act potentially. So companies that are traded in one jurisdiction, if there's potentially any nexus to the UK or the US in particular, they need to be aware of those pieces of legislation and think about what they need to do to make sure they're compliant with that legislation as well as their own local regulation.
In light of these regulations, what steps do multinationals and local corporates perhaps as well need to take?
I think the steps are similar, but there are some additional ones in terms of financial fraud and corruption. For financial fraud, if companies are looking to invest or partner with companies in jurisdictions that are higher risk than their home jurisdictions, they should be looking at doing some enhanced financial due diligence into those companies, perhaps using forensic accountants to supplement the financial due diligence team, using real experts and looking for red flags of financial statement manipulation, for example, to really see if there is true value in the assets and the revenue streams that have been reported. Equally, it's worth doing some more detailed background intelligence due diligence into the entity itself, but also into its key employees and key management, shareholders and directors. What other links outside the company do they have? Do they have other companies that they own or they direct? They're either competing with this business or are fundamental partners of that business where they may be critical to the business that you're looking to acquire or partner with. Clearly the risks are enhanced if the employees you're taking on and the management you're taking on have got outside interests that may be in competition with or you're very reliant on. So it's well worth looking into that, as well as looking more broader into their reputational backgrounds as well. You know, have they been involved in any other companies that have had issues in the past? And it's the same from the corruption aspect as well. It's worth doing that enhanced due diligence into the individuals and entities, but it's also worth doing specific anti-corruption due diligence to really identify what the risks are of that business paying bribes in its jurisdictions. So, for example, the biggest risk under the US Foreign Corrupt Practice Act and the Bribery Act in the UK is that bribes will be paid to foreign government officials in order to win or retain business. Now, clearly the risks are enhanced if a lot of your business depends on you winning work from government authorities, government departments and state-owned enterprises. So if there's a lot of links with government enterprises in that regard, you need to be doing more due diligence to understand how those relationships are managed, what are the contractual terms, how do you ensure that bribes are not being paid to win business.